Disney's most ambitious live-action adventure films of the 2020s, Jungle Cruise, released in 2021. This film is a 2021 American fantasy adventure film, and what makes it truly unique is that it is based on a Disney theme park attraction of the very same name. Yes, you heard that right. This entire movie was inspired by a theme park ride. Disney had previously done something similar with the massively successful Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, and with Jungle Cruise, they were looking to replicate that exact same magic and capture a whole new generation of fans. The film was directed by John Collet-Serra, a Spanish-American filmmaker who had previously worked with Liam Neeson on several intense action thrillers including Non-Stop and The Commuter. He was brought on board by Walt Disney Pictures to helm this massive production, and the screenplay was written by Michael Green, Glenn Ficarra, and John Requa, a talented writing team that brought both humor and emotional depth to the story. The film is produced under the Walt Disney Pictures banner with a reported production budget of approximately $200 million, placing it firmly among the most expensive productions of that year. Now, the Jungle Cruise ride itself has been a cornerstone of Disneyland since the park first opened its doors in 1955. For over 6 decades, the ride has taken guests on a boat tour through a simulated jungle environment filled with animatronic animals and a wisecracking skipper delivering terrible puns at every turn. It is beloved by generations of Disney fans all around the world, and turning it into a full-feature film was a project that had been quietly sitting in development for many years before it finally reached the big screen in 2021. The film combines elements of action, adventure, fantasy, and comedy, aiming for a tone that would work for families, couples, and general movie-going audiences alike. Plot details. Now let us get deep into the story, because Jungle Cruise has a surprisingly layered and rich narrative that goes much deeper than its theme park origins might suggest. The story begins all the way back in 1556. Where we are introduced to a determined Spanish conquistador named Don Aguirre. He commands a group of soldiers on a perilous journey deep into the jungles of South America, driven by one singular obsession: to find the mythical Lágrimas de Cristal tree, also known as the Tears of the Moon tree. This legendary tree is said to possess magical flowers that can cure any disease, heal any wound, and lift any curse. Aguirre's motivation is personal and deeply human. He wants to save his ailing daughter. After most of his men perish in the brutal jungle conditions, the surviving conquistadors are nursed back to health by a local indigenous tribe using petals from the very tree Aguirre was searching for. However, rather than showing gratitude, Aguirre and his men betrayed the tribe in their desperate attempt to possess the tree's power for themselves. As punishment for this betrayal, the tribe's leader places a powerful ancient curse upon Aguirre and all his men. They are bound to the jungle forever, unable to cross its boundaries, and they slowly begin to merge with the jungle itself, physically transforming into creatures made of the jungle's elements. Aguirre himself is transformed into a being intertwined with snakes, a visually striking and haunting image that establishes the dark, mythological heart of the film. Now we jump forward in time to 1916, right in the middle of World War I. We are introduced to our protagonist, Dr. Lily Houghton, a brilliant, fiercely independent British scientist and botanist who works at a prestigious London institution. Lily is passionate, headstrong, and refuses to be limited by the rigid gender norms of her era. She has dedicated her career to finding the legendary Tears of the Moon petals, believing that they could revolutionize medicine and save countless lives across the world. When she discovers a crucial arrowhead artifact housed in her institution that she believes holds the key to locating the tree, she takes matters into her own hands and steals it, with her fashionable and somewhat reluctant brother McGregor in tow. The two travel to Brazil, arriving at a small, chaotic port town on the banks of the Amazon River. It is here that they first encounter our second lead character, Captain Frank Wolf, a rough around the edges riverboat skipper who earns a modest living taking tourists on jungle cruises. Frank embellishes every tour with staged fake dangers and an endless stream of terrible jokes and puns, much to the simultaneous delight and frustration of those around him. He is charming, roguish, clearly hiding something beneath his humor, and deeply knowledgeable about the Amazon in ways that seem almost unnatural. Lily hires Frank to take her deep into the jungle in search of the tree. Frank, motivated by money and his own secret reasons, agrees. The three of them, Lily, Frank, and McGregor, set off down the Amazon on Frank's aging boat. Almost immediately, danger finds them. German forces led by the film's primary antagonist, Prince Joachim, are in hot pursuit. Joachim is a deranged, obsessive German royal who has financed a military expedition with one goal in mind: to claim the power of the Tears of the Moon Tree for Germany's war effort and for his own personal immortality. He commands a German submarine and pursues our heroes relentlessly throughout the film. As the journey progresses and the group ventures deeper into the jungle, the supernatural elements of the story begin to surface. Aguirre and his cursed conquistadors emerge as a terrifying supernatural threat. The jungle itself seems to conspire against the travelers, and the mythology of the ancient curse becomes increasingly central to the plot. Here comes the film's biggest and most emotionally resonant twist. Frank is revealed to be one of Aguirre's original conquistadors. He has been alive and bound to the jungle for over 400 years because of the ancient curse. This revelation completely reframes everything we know about him. His deep familiarity with the jungle, his cynicism, his reluctance to form genuine connections, it all makes sense now. Frank has spent 4 centuries watching the world change, unable to leave the Amazon, unable to die, unable to truly live. In the climactic sequence, the group finds the tree during a blood moon. A massive confrontation breaks out involving Joachim's forces, the cursed conquistadors, and our heroes. In a moment of selfless sacrifice, Frank crashes his boat to block the river, causing himself and the remaining conquistadors to turn to stone, petrified to save Lily and McGregor. But the story does not end there. Lily, having developed deep feelings for Frank over the course of their journey, makes the ultimate sacrifice herself. She uses the one magical flower she managed to retrieve, the petal that could have changed the course of medicine forever, to break Frank's curse and restore his mortality. It is a powerful, emotional moment that speaks to the film's core theme, that human connection and love are worth more than any magical power or immortality. Frank is freed. He is human again. He sells his boat and his business on the Amazon, and leaves his 400-year-old life behind to be with Lily in London. Lily, for her part, returns to Britain and is appointed a full professor at the University of Cambridge. A triumphant moment for a woman who had spent the entire film fighting against a world that refused to take her seriously. The film ends on a warm, hopeful note, full of possibility and new beginnings. Now let us talk about the people who brought this story to life, because the cast of Jungle Cruise is genuinely exceptional. Dwayne Johnson plays Captain Frank Wolf. Johnson's natural charisma, his physical presence, and his effortless comedic timing make him absolutely perfect for this role. He handles the film's humor brilliantly, delivering Frank's terrible puns with genuine conviction, but he also brings real emotional weight to the character's more vulnerable moments. When Frank's tragic backstory is revealed, Johnson makes you feel the full weight of 4 centuries of loneliness and isolation. Emily Blunt plays Dr. Lily Houghton and is arguably the standout performer of the entire film. Blunt brings intelligence, fire, and genuine emotional complexity to Lily. She is funny, determined, compassionate, and never once feels like a passive character waiting to be rescued. She drives the story forward from beginning to end. Her chemistry with Dwayne Johnson is electric and absolutely central to why the film works as well as it does. Jack Whitehall plays McGregor Houghton, Lily's brother, and serves as the film's primary source of comic relief. Whitehall's natural comedic instincts fit the role well, and his character is given a surprisingly touching subplot that adds genuine emotional depth to his presence in the story beyond just being the funny sidekick. Edgar Ramirez plays Don Aguirre, the 400-year-old cursed Spanish conquistador. Ramirez brings brooding menace and genuine tragic weight to a character who exists in a complex moral space. He is neither purely a villain nor simply a victim, but something more complicated and more interesting than either. Jesse Plemons plays Prince Joachim, the film's main human antagonist. Plemons plays the character with an eccentric, almost theatrical energy that provides a different flavor of villainy from Aguirre's supernatural darkness. His scenes are genuinely entertaining. Paul Giamatti plays Nilo, the harbor master at the Amazon port town. Giamatti commits fully to the character and delivers a performance that is wonderfully over the top in the best possible way, providing some of the film's most memorable comedic moments. Release date: Jungle Cruise had its world premiere at Disneyland Resort in Anaheim, California on July 24, 2021. It was officially released in the United States on July 30, 2021, simultaneously in theaters and on the Disney Plus streaming platform with premiere access for a fee of $29.99, a dual-release strategy that Disney adopted for several of its major releases during the pandemic era. The film's road to release was long and complicated. It was originally scheduled for release on October 11, 2019, then moved to July 24, 2020, and was ultimately delayed again due to the global COVID-19 pandemic before finally arriving in the summer of 2021. At the box office, the film grossed $117 million in the United States and Canada, and an additional $104 million in international territories, bringing its worldwide total to approximately $221 million. Given its enormous production and marketing costs, the film did not reach break-even at the theatrical box office alone, but it found a substantial and enthusiastic audience on Disney Plus and through home video releases. Following the film's opening weekend, Dwayne Johnson announced that discussions were already underway for a potential sequel. One of the most fascinating and unexpected behind-the-scenes stories of Jungle Cruise involves its musical score and a very surprising collaboration. Metallica, one of the most iconic rock bands in music history, collaborated with the film's composer to create an instrumental version of the legendary song Nothing Else Matters specifically for the film. According to the band, this collaboration came about after Walt Disney Pictures president Sean Bailey felt that Jungle Cruise was the perfect project for a Disney and Metallica crossover. The film's main score was recorded by a 99-piece orchestra, with additional vocals provided by the Los Angeles Master Chorale, an absolutely massive musical undertaking that gives the film its grand, sweeping, adventurous sound. Trailer info: The official trailer for Jungle Cruise was released back in 2019 and immediately generated massive excitement among Disney fans and moviegoers in general. It showcased the film's stunning visual production, the undeniable chemistry between Johnson and Blunt, spectacular action sequences, and the film's fun, self-aware sense of humor. The trailer made direct and intentional comparisons to Pirates of the Caribbean, which for many audiences was an incredibly compelling sell. It accumulated tens of millions of views across platforms and set high expectations for the final film. The subsequent trailers and promotional materials continued to emphasize the film's blend of adventure, humor, and heart, building significant anticipation right up until its release day. Critical reception: Jungle Cruise received a mixed to positive reception from critics upon its release. Most reviewers praise the lead performances of Johnson and Blunt, the film's visual spectacle, and its willingness to commit to a fun, old-school adventure tone. Some critics noted that the plot leaned on familiar adventure movie conventions, and that the pacing in the second half became somewhat dense with mythology. However, audience scores were notably warmer than critic scores, with general viewers responding enthusiastically to the film's entertainment value, its charming leads, and its heartfelt emotional core. It is the kind of movie that is made to be enjoyed with family and friends, and on that level, it largely delivers. The beginning, 16th century Amazon. Our story begins not in the present day, not even in the 20th century, but all the way back in the year 1556. We are deep in the heart of South America, in the dense, unforgiving jungles of the Amazon rainforest. A group of Spanish conquistadors, heavily armored and exhausted, push their way through the thick undergrowth. Leading them is Don Aguirre, a proud, determined, and deeply desperate man. Aguirre is not here for gold or for glory in the traditional sense. He is here for something far more personal. His daughter is gravely ill, and he has heard legends, ancient, whispered legends, of a tree hidden somewhere deep in this jungle. A tree unlike any other in the world. The locals call it the Lágrimas de Cristal, which translates to the tears of the moon. This tree is said to bloom only under the light of a blood moon, and its flowers possess powers that defy all natural understanding. These petals can heal any wound, cure any sickness, and lift any curse. For a father watching his daughter suffer, this tree represents the only hope left in the world. The journey is brutal. The Amazon does not welcome outsiders. Disease, dangerous wildlife, treacherous terrain, and the suffocating heat claim the lives of many of Aguirre's soldiers one by one. The survivors are gaunt, broken, and on the verge of collapse when something remarkable happens. They are found by a local indigenous tribe, a people who have lived in harmony with the jungle for centuries and who know its secrets better than anyone. These people take pity on the dying conquistadors and nurse them back to health. And here is where the miracle happens. The tribe uses petals from the very tree Aguirre has been searching for to heal his men. The petals work. The soldiers recover. Aguirre sees with his own eyes the impossible power of the tears of the moon, but rather than responding to this extraordinary act of compassion with gratitude, Aguirre's obsession overrides his humanity. He wants the tree. He wants all of it. He wants to control this power. And so he and his men betray the tribe. They turn on the very people who saved their lives, attacking them in their attempt to claim the tree and its location for themselves. It is an act of monstrous ingratitude, a betrayal of the most fundamental human decency. The tribe's leader, a powerful and ancient figure, does not simply fight back with weapons. Instead, she calls upon forces far deeper and more powerful than any sword or cannon. She places a curse upon Aguirre and every one of his men. The curse is both poetic and terrible in its design. They will be bound to the jungle forever. They cannot leave its borders. If they cross the boundaries of the Amazon, they will begin to deteriorate and crumble. They are denied death but also denied any true life. And slowly, over time, the jungle will claim them, physically. Their bodies will begin to merge with the elements of the Amazon itself. One man becomes covered in honeybees, living creatures that make a permanent home of his flesh. Another is consumed by tree bark, his skin hardening and splitting like ancient wood. And Aguirre himself becomes intertwined with snakes, living serpents that writhe beneath his skin and through his body, making him a terrifying, almost mythological creature. They are alive, cursed, and utterly trapped. The conquistadors scatter through the jungle, immortal and miserable, a cautionary tale left to haunt the Amazon for centuries. 1916, London, England. Now we leap forward 360 years to the year 1916. The world is at war. World War I rages across Europe, consuming nations and lives at a scale previously unimaginable. But in the grand reading rooms and stuffy corridors of a prestigious London academic institution, a different kind of battle is being fought. Dr. Lily Houghton is a woman ahead of her time. She is a botanist and scientist of extraordinary intelligence and passion, and she has spent years researching the legend of the tears of the moon tree. She is absolutely convinced that this tree is real, that its petals are real, and that finding them could change the face of medicine forever. Imagine being able to cure any disease, heal any wound, in the middle of a world war. The implications of such a discovery are staggering. Lily sees this not as fantasy but as science, as a mission, as her life's purpose. The problem is that the institution she works for does not take her seriously. The academic world of 1916 is dominated entirely by men, and those men consistently dismiss, ignore, and talk over Lily at every turn. She is not allowed to present her own research to the board. When she tries, her brother McGregor has to stand up and read her notes on her behalf, because the institution refuses to hear a woman speak. It is a maddening, humiliating situation for someone of Lily's obvious brilliance, and it fuels her determination to act on her own terms. Lily has discovered that a crucial artifact is being held in the institution's collection, an ancient arrowhead that she believes is directly linked to the location of the tears of the moon tree. The arrowhead is not merely decorative. It is a puzzle piece, part of a larger mechanism, and Lily is convinced that with it, she can find the tree. When the institution refuses to give it to her, she does what any determined, brilliant, slightly reckless scientist would do: she steals it. In a wonderfully chaotic sequence, Lily infiltrates the collection and makes off with the arrowhead, with her brother McGregor scrambling to keep up and not get caught. McGregor Houghton is Lily's younger brother, and her most loyal companion. He is refined, fashionable, deeply uncomfortable with physical danger, and completely devoted to his sister. He may not share her passion for adventure or her tolerance for risk, but he would follow Lily to the ends of the earth because he loves her and believes in her, even when the rest of the world does not. With the arrowhead in hand, Lily knows exactly where she needs to go. The Amazon? Brazil. The heart of the jungle. She and McGregor book passage to South America, setting off on an expedition that will change both of their lives forever. Arriving in Brazil, meeting Frank WLFF, Lily and McGregor arrive at a small, bustling, chaotic port town on the banks of the Amazon River. It is a world away from the ordered formality of London, noisy, colorful, unpredictable, full of travelers, traders, and river folk going about their business in the thick, humid air of the Brazilian jungle. It is here that Lily is directed toward a man named Frank Wolf. Frank runs a modest riverboat operation, taking tourists on guided jungle cruises down the Amazon. His boat is called L'Aquila, an aging vessel that has clearly seen better days, and his tours are a carefully staged spectacle of fake danger and real entertainment. Frank has rigged the jungle along his regular route with various theatrical surprises: a fake jaguar attack, a staged whirlpool, a near miss with a waterfall, all designed to give tourists the thrill of adventure without any actual risk. And throughout it all, he delivers an endless stream of terrible puns and jokes with the committed enthusiasm of a man who genuinely finds himself hilarious. Frank is charismatic in a rough, weathered way. He is clearly very intelligent, clearly very knowledgeable about the Amazon, and clearly hiding something significant beneath his humor and his swagger. He has a relationship with a jaguar named Proxima that he has raised from a cub, and the easy affection between the man and the wild animal hints at a depth of character that goes beyond the jolly tour guide persona he presents to the world. Frank also has debts. He owes money to Nilo, the harbor master, a pompous and greedy man who has been extracting payments from Frank for years and who holds various pieces of Frank's boat and equipment as leverage. When Lily approaches Frank about hiring his boat for an expedition deep into the jungle, Frank initially quotes her a price designed to send her away. He does not want the responsibility, the complication, or the danger that Lily's determined eyes clearly signal is coming. But Lily negotiates fiercely, and Frank ultimately agrees, partly because he needs the money to pay Nilo, and partly because something about Lily's mission clearly resonates with him in ways he is not yet ready to reveal. Before they can even properly begin preparations, the situation becomes significantly more complicated. German forces are already in the area. Prince Joachim, a wild-eyed, obsessive German royal, has brought a military expedition to the Amazon with his own agenda. Joachim has learned of the Tears of the Moon legend and wants the tree's power for Germany, both to turn the tide of the war and to achieve personal immortality. He has a German submarine at his disposal and mercenaries willing to do his bidding. He knows about the arrowhead that Lily stole, and he wants it back. Joachim is eccentric in the way that only the very powerful and very unhinged can be. He speaks with theatrical flair. He is absolutely certain of his own destiny, and he is genuinely dangerous beneath the theatrics. Lily, Frank, and McGregor narrowly escape the port town with Joachim's forces in pursuit, setting off down the Amazon on L'Aquila as the beginning of their extraordinary, dangerous, and deeply complicated adventure. Down the Amazon, the journey begins the early part of their river. Journey is defined by bickering, mistrust, and mutual irritation. Frank and Lily clash immediately and constantly. Lily thinks Frank is a fraud, a con man playing at being an adventurer. Frank thinks Lily is a reckless academic with no idea what the real jungle is actually like. They are both partially right about each other, which makes their arguments genuinely entertaining. McGregor sits in the middle, trying to keep the peace, getting increasingly alarmed by his surroundings, and providing much of the film's most effective comedy simply through his reactions to the chaos unfolding around him. But even in these early stages, something more is developing beneath the surface. Frank proves himself genuinely knowledgeable about the jungle in ways that go far beyond what any tour guide should know. He reads the river, the trees, the wildlife with an almost supernatural familiarity. He knows things about the Amazon's history and mythology that he should have no way of knowing. Lily notices this, but she is too focused on her mission to fully investigate it yet. Joachim's submarine surfaces periodically to threaten an attack, forcing Frank to navigate the river with skill and creativity. The action sequences on the water are spectacular and propulsive, raising the stakes early and reminding the audience that this is not simply a leisurely river cruise. As they travel deeper into the jungle, further from civilization, the atmosphere shifts. The jungle becomes denser, darker, and stranger. Local legends that seemed like folklore begin to feel more immediate, more real. And the cursed conquistadors begin to stir. The curse revealed, Aguirre and his cursed conquistadors have been waiting in the jungle for 360 years. They are terrible to behold, men who were once soldiers, now transformed into something halfway between human and jungle. They are not fully dead, not fully alive, not fully human, not fully monster. They are just cursed. Endlessly, exhaustingly, horribly cursed. Aguirre himself is particularly striking. Snakes move beneath his skin and through his body, living creatures that have become part of him over the centuries. Despite his monstrous appearance, there is something unmistakably tragic about him. His original motivation was love. He wanted to save his daughter. The curse punishes that love by trapping him forever in the very jungle he came to for help, unable to reach his daughter, unable to complete his mission, unable to die and find peace. He has become something that the jungle made him, not something he chose to be. Aguirre is not straightforwardly villainous in the way that Joaquim is. He is a man who made a terrible choice out of desperation and has been paying for it ever since. The centuries have not been kind to him, but they have also not been without reflection. He knows what he did. He knows why he was cursed. And there is a part of him that has almost accepted his fate, even as another part still desperately wants to break it. The other conquistadors are each uniquely horrifying, one covered in living bees, one encased in bark and vegetation, each a walking illustration of what it means to be consumed by the jungle that you tried to violate. They move through the trees like ghosts, aware of every person who enters their domain, and they are deeply invested in the legend of the tears of the moon because the petals also hold the only power capable of ending their curse. Frank's secret. This is the heart of the film. The revelation that changes everything. Over the course of their journey, Lily begins to notice that Frank knows far too much. He knows the exact paths through jungle that have not been charted in centuries. He knows stories about the Amazon that are not written in any book she has ever read. He knows the river the way you can only know something you have spent a lifetime with, except the lifetime he would have needed to accumulate this knowledge is far longer than any single human lifetime could account for. And then the truth comes out. Frank Wolf is not a 20th century river guide who happened to develop a deep love of the Amazon. Frank is one of Aguirre's conquistadors. He made the crossing to South America in 1556. He was there when the tribe was betrayed. He was there when the curse was cast. And he has been there ever since, bound to the Amazon, unable to leave, watching 4 centuries of human history unfold along these river banks while remaining fundamentally unchanged. This revelation lands with enormous emotional weight. Suddenly, everything about Frank makes sense and simultaneously becomes infinitely more complicated. His terrible jokes are the humor of a man who has had 400 years to practice deflecting genuine emotion. His knowledge of the jungle is the knowledge of someone who has lived there for centuries. His reluctance to form real connections is the self-preservation of a man who has watched everyone he has ever cared about age and die while he remains the same. Frank has not spent those 400 years as a monster. He found a way to build a life of sorts within the boundaries of the jungle. He built his boat. He ran his tours. He took care of Proxima. He managed his existence as best he could. But it has been a profoundly lonely 400 years, and the loneliness is written into every line of him. When Lily learns the truth about Frank, her initial reaction is shock and a degree of betrayal. He has been withholding crucial information relevant to their mission. But very quickly, the scientist in her gives way to the human in her, and she begins to see Frank not as a supernatural curiosity but as a person who has been suffering for an extraordinarily long time and who deserves compassion. Their relationship deepens dramatically in the aftermath of this revelation, shifting from antagonism to genuine emotional intimacy. The convergence. All forces meet as the group gets closer to the location of the tears of the moon tree. All the forces in the story begin converging. Joaquim's military forces are closing in. The cursed conquistadors are becoming more active. The jungle itself seems to be responding to the approach of the blood moon, the one celestial event under whose light the tree will bloom. Joaquim manages to capture our heroes at a critical moment, and in a desperate bid to secure one of the tree's petals for himself, Frank makes a dark deal with the German prince. He will lead Joaquim to the tree if Joaquim allows him a single petal, enough to break the curse that has trapped him for 4 centuries. It is a morally complicated moment for Frank, one that speaks to the depth of his desperation after so many centuries of imprisonment. Even a man of genuine good character can be brought to the edge of compromise by 400 years of suffering. The blood moon rises. The tree blooms for the first time in centuries, its flowers opening under the red-tinged moonlight in a genuinely beautiful and awe-inspiring visual sequence. It is everything Lily ever dreamed of seeing, and the weight of that moment for her, the culmination of years of ridicule and struggle and determination, is palpable in Emily Blunt's performance. But peace does not last. The moment the tree blooms, chaos erupts. Joaquim's soldiers move in. The cursed conquistadors emerge in force. A massive, frantic battle breaks out around the sacred tree. In the confusion, Lily manages to seize a single flower, one petal, the fruit of everything she has worked for. Joaquim's forces are dealt with dramatically. German soldiers drowned by the river as the confrontation reaches its peak, and Joaquim himself is crushed by falling rock, his grand ambitions brought to an end by the very jungle he tried to exploit. But Frank is not done with his sacrifice. The sacrifice, and the ending with the battle still raging and Lily and McGregor in danger, Frank makes the ultimate decision. He crashes L'Aquila, his boat, his home, his entire world for 4 centuries, into the river to block its flow. The impact is catastrophic and beautiful. The act triggers something in the ancient curse. Frank and all the remaining cursed conquistadors begin to turn to stone, their bodies petrifying in a cascade of ancient magic, their long imprisonment finally coming to an end in a form they did not quite anticipate. Frank becomes rock. Still. Frozen. It should be the end. Lily stands there with the single flower in her hands. One petal. Enough to potentially change medicine forever. Enough to fulfill everything she came here for. And she looks at Frank, frozen in stone, and she understands something that her scientific training never prepared her for. She uses the petal on Frank, not on medicine. Not on a research breakthrough. Not on herself. On Frank. She presses the magical petal against the stone that has claimed him, and the ancient curse breaks. Frank's mortality is restored. He crumbles back into flesh and breath and life, genuinely human for the first time in 400 years. He opens his eyes and he sees Lily standing there, and he understands immediately what she gave up for him. A final beam of moonlight from the blood moon touches the tree one last time, and a single flower blooms, just one, just enough, a gift from the jungle to the woman who chose love over legacy. Lily takes that last flower, small and precious, and tucks it away. Not for the institution. Not to prove herself to the academic world. For real research. For the genuine pursuit of something that might help people, conducted on her own terms. Frank sells L'Aquila and everything connected to his 400-year-old life on the Amazon. He says goodbye to Proxima the jaguar, a genuinely emotional farewell between a man and the animal companion who was his most consistent relationship during the long centuries of isolation. And then he leaves the Amazon for the first time in 400 years and goes to London. Lily is appointed a full professor at the University of Cambridge, finally, formally, officially recognized for the brilliance she always possessed. It is a triumphant moment not just for her but for every person who was ever told their ideas were not worth listening to. Frank arrives in London, mortal and free, and the two of them begin something new together. McGregor, characteristically, is already planning which London clubs would best suit a man of Frank's newly restored humanity. The jungle that kept Frank prisoner for 4 centuries becomes, in the end, the place where he found the reason to live a real life. And Lily, who came to the Amazon looking for a tree, found something she never expected to find, a partner, an equal, and a genuinely extraordinary story to go along with her scientific discovery. Dwayne Johnson, The Rockley Life and Family BACKGROUND. Dwayne Douglas Johnson was born on May 2, 1972, in Hayward, California. From the very first moments of his life, Dwayne Johnson was surrounded by the world of professional wrestling. His father, Rocky Johnson was a professional wrestler who became one of the first African American tag team champions in WWE history alongside Tony Atlas. His maternal grandfather, Peter Maivia, was also a legendary professional wrestler and a significant figure in the history of the sport in Hawaii. Wrestling was not just a career choice for the men in Dwayne's family. It was a way of life, a culture, an identity that permeated everything. Growing up, Dwayne's life was defined by constant movement. Because his father was a professional wrestler who traveled the country performing at different venues, the Johnson family moved repeatedly throughout Dwayne's childhood. He lived in many different states and attended numerous different schools, never staying long enough in any one place to build deep roots or lasting friendships. This nomadic upbringing was challenging for a young boy who desperately wanted stability and a sense of belonging. Dwayne has spoken openly in interviews about how difficult it was to constantly be the new kid, to have to reinvent himself socially over and over again in unfamiliar environments. The family faced genuine financial hardship during much of Dwayne's childhood. There were periods when money was extremely tight, and Dwayne has recalled specific memories of struggling financially that left a permanent mark on his understanding of poverty, ambition, and the value of hard work. One of the most famous stories he tells is about arriving home one day as a teenager to find that their family had been evicted from their apartment. Everything they owned was on the street outside. That image, his mother sitting on the curb outside their former home, is one that Dwayne has cited repeatedly as a defining moment in his life, the moment he made a silent vow to himself that he would build a life where financial insecurity would never claim his family again. The family eventually settled in Hawaii for a period, where Dwayne spent some of his formative years surrounded by his mother's Samoan heritage. His mother, Ada Johnson, is of Samoan descent, which makes Dwayne half black and half Samoan, a heritage he has always been intensely proud of and that has shaped both his identity and his public persona significantly. Teenage years and trouble with the law. Dwayne's teenage years were turbulent. By his own admission, he was a troubled young man who made poor decisions and repeatedly found himself on the wrong side of the law. Growing up without financial stability, moving constantly, and feeling like an outsider in every new environment he found himself in contributed to a rebellious, angry phase that could have derailed his life entirely. He was arrested multiple times as a teenager, mostly for fighting and theft. By the age of 17, Dwayne had been arrested approximately 8 or 9 times. He stole from shops, got into physical altercations, and ran with groups of young men whose influence was not positive. These were not minor incidents. These were patterns of behavior that, for many young men, lead to a life of crime or incarceration rather than success. What saved Dwayne Johnson, by his own account, was football. He discovered that he had a genuine, exceptional talent for the sport, and football gave him something that nothing else in his turbulent life had ever provided: structure, discipline, a team, a purpose, and a pathway forward. He threw himself into the sport with everything he had, and his natural physical gifts combined with his intense work ethic made him one of the most promising young football players in his area. Football career and the University of Miami. Dwayne Johnson's football talent earned him a scholarship to the University of Miami, one of the most prestigious football programs in the entire United States. This was an extraordinary achievement for a kid from a financially struggling family with a criminal record, a genuine second chance handed to him by his own athletic ability. At the University of Miami, Dwayne played as a defensive tackle and was genuinely excellent. He was part of a Miami Hurricanes team during a particularly strong era for the program, and he held his own against competition that was among the best in college football. During his time at Miami, he won a national championship with the team, a moment of triumph that confirmed his belief that football could be his ticket to a different life. However, football also brought its first major heartbreak. Dwayne's dream was to be drafted into the NFL, the National Football League, and to make a professional career out of the sport he loved and that had saved him. He trained relentlessly, pushed his body to its limits, and believed with complete conviction that the NFL was his destiny. But when the 1995 NFL draft came around, Dwayne Johnson was not selected. Not in any round. He was passed over entirely. This was a devastating blow. Everything he had worked toward, the scholarship, the hard work, the championship, none of it had translated into the professional opportunity he had counted on. He was briefly signed by the Calgary Stampeders in the Canadian Football League, but was cut from the team after only 2 months, earning just a few $100s a week during that brief period. He returned to his family's home in Tampa, Florida, with $7 in his pocket, a detail he has shared publicly many times as the low point of his young adult life. Entering professional wrestling with football behind him, and no clear path forward, Dwayne made the decision that would ultimately change everything. He would follow his father and grandfather into professional wrestling. This was not an easy decision. Professional wrestling carried a certain stigma in mainstream culture, and Dwayne had genuinely aspired to the legitimacy of professional sports through football. But he was out of options and out of money, and wrestling was in his blood. He began training intensively with his father, learning the craft of professional wrestling from the ground up. Despite his family connections, Dwayne was not given any shortcuts or special treatment in the wrestling world. He started at the very bottom, performing in small regional promotions in front of tiny crowds for minimal pay, learning how to work a crowd, how to take bumps, how to tell a story in the ring. In 1996, Dwayne Johnson made his debut in the World Wrestling Federation, which would later become WWE. He debuted under the name Rocky Maivia, a combination of his father's and grandfather's ring names. The character was initially presented as a smiling, enthusiastic, clean-cut babyface, a hero for the audience to cheer. But audiences were not immediately warm to him. There was a genuine rejection from the crowd, who found the character too polished, too perfect, too artificial. Fans began to chant negative things at him during his matches, and for a young man who had worked so hard to get to this stage, it was a profoundly discouraging experience. But then came the transformation that created a legend. Dwayne Johnson reinvented himself completely, turning the crowd's rejection into fuel. He embraced a new character, a cocky, arrogant, trash-talking villain who referred to himself in the third person as The Rock. He developed a persona built on electrifying charisma, sharp wit, and an extraordinary gift for connecting with an audience through the microphone. The Rock could cut a promo, deliver a speech in the ring, unlike almost anyone else in the history of the business. He had a natural comedic timing, a magnetic stage presence, and an ability to generate a reaction from a crowd that very few performers in any medium possess. The transformation worked beyond anyone's expectations. The Rock became one of the most popular and bankable stars in professional wrestling history. He won multiple world championships, headlined some of the biggest pay-per-view events in WWE history, and became one of the defining figures of wrestling's Attitude Era in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Catchphrases like, "Can you smell what The Rock is cooking?" and "Know your role and shut your mouth," became part of popular culture. He was arguably the most charismatic performer the wrestling world had ever seen. Transition to HOLLYWOOD. Even at the height of his wrestling fame, Dwayne Johnson had his eyes on Hollywood. He had always been drawn to performing, to storytelling, to the idea of reaching an audience beyond the wrestling world. His first significant film appearance came in 2001 in The Mummy Returns, where he played the Scorpion King in a relatively small but visually memorable role. The response to his appearance was strong enough that Universal Pictures immediately greenlit a spin-off film centered entirely on the character. The Scorpion King, released in 2002, was Dwayne Johnson's first leading role in a major Hollywood film, and it was a significant success. The film performed well at the box office and demonstrated that Dwayne's charisma translated from the wrestling ring to the movie screen in a way that not every wrestler who attempted the crossover could manage. Throughout the mid-2000s, Dwayne continued building his film career while gradually reducing his wrestling commitments. Films like The Rundown in 2003 and Walking Tall in 2004 further established him as a legitimate action star with genuine comedic chops. His easy charm and physical presence made him a natural fit for action-adventure films, and Hollywood took notice. However, his career hit a period of inconsistency in the late 2000s when he took on a string of family-friendly comedies including The Tooth Fairy and Race to Witch Mountain that, while commercially reasonable, did not play to his strengths and somewhat diluted the badass action hero image he had carefully cultivated. Critics and fans began to question whether Dwayne Johnson was being used correctly by Hollywood. The turning point came in 2011 when Dwayne Johnson joined the Fast and Furious franchise in Fast 5, playing the role of federal agent Luke Hobbs. His arrival in the franchise was electric. His chemistry with Vin Diesel was immediate and combustible, and his character brought exactly the kind of massive, charismatic energy the franchise needed to take it to the next level. Fast 5 became one of the highest-grossing films in the franchise to that point, and Dwayne Johnson was a huge part of why. From that point forward, Dwayne Johnson's career trajectory was essentially vertical. He became one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood, anchoring massive franchises and blockbusters with remarkable consistency. Hercules, San Andreas, Central Intelligence, Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle and its sequel, the Fast and Furious spin-off Hobbs and Shaw, film after film demonstrated that Dwayne Johnson was one of the most reliable box office draws in the world. Personal life: Dwayne Johnson has been married twice. His first marriage was to Dany Garcia, whom he met at the University of Miami. They married in 1997 and had a daughter together named Simone. Despite divorcing in 2008, Dwayne and Dany have maintained an extraordinarily close relationship and continue to work together professionally. Dany Garcia is his manager and business partner to this day, a testament to their mutual respect and genuine friendship. Dwayne has been in a relationship with singer and songwriter Lauren Heshian since around 2007. The two married in 2019 in a private ceremony in Hawaii. Together they have two daughters, Jasmine and Tiana. Dwayne is famously devoted to all three of his daughters and is very open about the importance of fatherhood in his life. He has also been remarkably open about his struggles with depression, particularly during the period after his football dreams collapsed. He has spoken publicly about experiencing serious depressive episodes and has used his platform to encourage other men, particularly, to speak openly about mental health rather than suffering in silence. Emily Blunt. Early life and childhood. Emily Olivia Leah Blunt was born on February 23, 1983, in Roehampton, London, England. She grew up in a household that was intellectually stimulating and creatively rich. Her father, Oliver Simon Peter Blunt, is a barrister, a type of lawyer in the British legal system, and her mother, Joanna, was a teacher who later became an actress. Emily grew up alongside three siblings in a warm, middle-class London family that valued education, culture, and intellectual engagement. From very early in her childhood, Emily displayed a natural inclination toward performance and storytelling. She was imaginative, expressive, and drawn to the world of make-believe in the way that many future performers are from a young age. However, Emily's path to acting was not straightforward, because she faced a significant obstacle that seemed, for a time, as though it might make a career in performance impossible. Emily Blunt had a severe stutter. From around the age of 7 or 8, she developed a stammer so pronounced that speaking fluently in everyday situations was genuinely difficult and often deeply distressing. The stutter affected her confidence profoundly and made social interactions, particularly in school settings where children can be unkind about difference, a source of real anxiety and pain. Emily has spoken extensively about how isolating and humiliating the stutter made her feel during her childhood years, and how it shaped her relationship with communication and self-expression. The transformation came in a way that nobody, least of all Emily, could have predicted. A teacher at her school suggested that she try acting, specifically, that she try performing characters who spoke differently from herself. The theory was that inhabiting a different character, speaking in a different voice, might allow her to bypass the neurological patterns that caused the stutter. It worked. When Emily Blunt stepped into a character and spoke someone else's words in someone else's voice, the stutter disappeared. Acting was not just a creative outlet for Emily Blunt, it was literally the thing that gave her back her voice. This origin story is fundamental to understanding Emily Blunt as a performer. Acting was never simply a career choice or a passion for her. It was the solution to one of the most painful challenges of her early life. Every performance she gives carries, at some level, the memory of what it felt like to be unable to speak freely and the extraordinary relief of discovering that she could. Education and early training. Emily attended Herdwood House, a private sixth-form college in Surrey that is particularly well known for its strong arts programs and for producing a notable number of alumni who go on to careers in entertainment. It was during her time at Herdwood House that Emily's passion for acting truly took hold, and her talent became undeniable to those around her. She performed in numerous school productions and developed the technical foundation of her craft in a supportive, arts-focused environment. She was not a drama school graduate in the traditional British theatrical sense. She did not attend the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art or the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. But her natural gift was sufficiently evident that she was able to build a professional career relatively quickly after her time at Herdwood House. Early career and BREAKTHROUGH. Emily's professional career began on the stage. She appeared in a number of theater productions in the United Kingdom in the early 2000s, building experience and confidence in live performance. Her stage work brought her to the attention of casting directors, and she began to make appearances in British television productions. Her real breakthrough came in 2003 when she was cast in a television miniseries called Henry VIII, in which she played Catherine Howard, one of Henry VIII's 6 wives. The role required Emily to portray a young woman navigating the terrifying political and personal landscape of the Tudor court, and her performance demonstrated a maturity and emotional intelligence that far exceeded her years. Critics took notice immediately, but it was her performance in the 2004 television film Gideon's Daughter that truly announced Emily Blunt as a major talent. In this film she played opposite Bill Nighy and delivered a performance of such genuine emotional depth and quiet power that she won a Golden Globe Award for Best Supporting Actress, an extraordinary achievement for a performer so early in her career. Winning a Golden Globe before most young actors have even established themselves in their home country marked Emily Blunt as someone genuinely exceptional. Hollywood called almost immediately. Emily made her American film debut in a supporting role in My Summer of Love in 2004, and then the film that made her a household name internationally arrived in 2006. The Devil Wears Prada. Emily played Emily Charlton, the sharp-tongued, status-obsessed first assistant to Miranda Priestly at a fictional fashion magazine. The role was a supporting one, the lead being Meryl Streep. But Emily Blunt's performance was so precise, so wickedly funny, so perfectly calibrated that she very nearly stole the entire film. She was nominated for a BAFTA award for her work, and suddenly the entire film world knew her name. Building a remarkable career. What followed the success of The Devil Wears Prada was one of the most impressively diverse careers in contemporary Hollywood. Emily Blunt made a series of choices that consistently defied easy categorization, moving between genres, tones, and scales with a confidence and range that very few performers can match. She appeared in romantic comedies like The 5-Year Engagement alongside Jason Segel, demonstrating a light comic touch and natural screen chemistry. She stepped into action territory with Edge of Tomorrow in 2014, playing opposite Tom Cruise in a science fiction action film that required her to perform intense physical sequences while also anchoring the film's emotional core. Her performance in Edge of Tomorrow was widely praised as one of the best action performances by a female actor in recent memory. She was not the love interest or the sidekick, she was the most capable and dangerous soldier in the film, and she owned every frame she was in. Sicario in 2015 was another extraordinary turn, a dark, morally complex crime thriller directed by Denis Villeneuve in which Emily played an FBI agent drawn into the murky world of the American government's war on drug cartels. The film was intense, bleak, and demanding, and Emily's performance was utterly gripping. Then came Mary Poppins Returns in 2018, in which Emily took on what might be the most daunting challenge of her career, stepping into the iconic role originated by Julie Andrews in the 1964 Disney classic. The pressure of following Julie Andrews in such a beloved role would have paralyzed many performers, but Emily Blunt brought something genuinely fresh and magical to Mary Poppins. She received widespread critical acclaim and a Golden Globe nomination for the role. And then came A Quiet Place in 2018, perhaps her most celebrated dramatic performance. Directed by her husband John Krasinski, A Quiet Place is a horror film set in a world where creatures hunt by sound, forcing a family to live in near total silence. Emily's performance in this film is remarkable precisely because so much of it must be communicated without words, through expression, through physicality, through the smallest gestures and glances. The film was both a critical and commercial smash, and Emily's work was recognized as the emotional heart of everything that made it so effective. The contrast with her childhood stutter, a performer who once could not speak freely now delivering one of the most powerful silent performances in modern cinema, is not lost on anyone who knows her story. Her performance, as Lily Houghton in Jungle Cruise, represents another dimension of her range, the action-adventure heroine with genuine comedic spark and emotional warmth. And in 2023, she delivered what many consider her career best work in Oppenheimer, playing Kitty Oppenheimer in Christopher Nolan's epic historical drama. Her performance in Oppenheimer earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, the latest recognition in a career defined by consistently exceptional work. Personal life: Emily Blunt married Canadian-American actor and filmmaker John Krasinski in 2010. Krasinski is best known for playing Jim Halpert in the American version of The Office and for his work directing the A Quiet Place films. Their relationship has become one of the most celebrated partnerships in Hollywood. Two genuinely talented, widely liked performers who appear to have built a genuinely happy and grounded life together. They have 2 daughters, Hazel and Violet, and the family divides their time between the United States and the United Kingdom. Emily is known in Hollywood for being warm, collaborative, and genuinely supportive of her colleagues. She has maintained close friendships with many of the actors and directors she has worked with, and she is consistently described by those who work with her as one of the most professional, prepared, and generous performers in the industry. Jack Whitehall, early life and privileged BGINNINGS. John Whitehall, known professionally as Jack Whitehall, was born on July 7, 1988, in Westminster, London, England. Jack's background is one of the most openly discussed aspects of his public persona, largely because it is so strikingly at odds with the self-deprecating everyman image that comedians often cultivate. Jack Whitehall comes from a background of considerable privilege and has built much of his comedic identity around mining that privilege for humor. His father, Michael Whitehall, is a highly successful theatrical agent who has represented some of the biggest names in British entertainment over the course of a long and distinguished career. His mother, Hilary Amanda Jane Whitehall, comes from an aristocratic family background. Jack grew up in a world of comfort, private education, and social connection that gave him access to opportunities most aspiring performers could only dream of. He attended Dragon School in Oxford as a child, a prestigious preparatory school. He then went to Marlborough College, one of the most elite boarding schools in England, whose alumni include an impressive list of notable figures from British public life. After Marlborough, Jack studied at the University of Manchester, though his heart was always more in comedy and performance than in academic study. Comedy career and rise to fame. Jack Whitehall began performing stand-up comedy at a young age, appearing at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe while still a teenager. The Edinburgh Fringe is the most important annual showcase for new comedy talent in the United Kingdom, and performing there as a teenager demonstrated both Jack's ambition and his genuine early talent. His comedy style is built around a very specific and well-developed persona, the posh, self-aware, slightly hapless product of an upper-class English upbringing who is simultaneously proud of and embarrassed by his privileged origins. He leans into his background rather than trying to hide it, using his own life as the primary material for his jokes. The result is a comedic voice that is distinctly his own and that has proven enormously popular with British audiences who either recognize themselves in his world or enjoy laughing at it from the outside. His television career took off significantly with the British series Fresh Meat, in which he played J.P., an outrageously posh university student whose casual arrogance and complete lack of self-awareness made him one of the show's most beloved characters. The role was essentially a heightened version of Jack's own comedic persona, and he played it brilliantly. But perhaps the most unique and successful aspect of Jack Whitehall's career has been his relationship with his father. Michael Whitehall, despite being a man in his 70s from a traditional English background, has become something of a comedy phenomenon himself through his appearances alongside Jack. The two have collaborated on a Netflix travel series called Jack Whitehall Travels with My Father, in which they travel to various destinations around the world and find comedy in their generational differences, their contrasting personalities, and the culture clashes they encounter. The series has been enormously popular and has introduced Jack to a genuinely global audience. Watching a young, irreverent comedian and his stiff, traditional, aristocratic elderly father attempt to navigate foreign cultures together turned out to be comedy gold, and the genuine warmth of their real relationship gives the show a heartfelt quality beneath all the laughs. Jack has also done significant stand-up work, performing multiple sold-out tours across the United Kingdom and internationally. His stand-up specials have been well received and have demonstrated his ability to hold an audience entirely on his own, without the comedic crutch of his father's presence. Acting career and Jungle Cruise. Jack's acting career has developed alongside his comedy work. In addition to Fresh Meat, he has appeared in numerous British television productions and has made the transition to international film work, with Jungle Cruise being his most high-profile Hollywood appearance to date. Playing McGregor Houghton, Emily Blunt's fashionable, comfort-loving, humorously reluctant brother, was a role that fitted Jack's established comedic persona extremely well. The role also gave Jack a moment of genuine dramatic significance. McGregor has a scene in which he confides something deeply personal to Frank Wolf about his own identity, and his reasons for always accompanying and supporting his sister so unconditionally. It is a quiet, sincere moment in the middle of an adventure film, and Jack handles it with a sensitivity and restraint that surprised many viewers and demonstrated that there is more to him as a performer than comic mudding. Edgar Ramirez Early Life in Venezuela. Edgar Ramirez was born on March 25, 1977, in San Cristobal, Venezuela, a city in the western part of the country near the Colombian border. Venezuela in the 1970s and 1980s was a country of considerable oil wealth and cultural vibrancy, and Edgar grew up in an environment that valued education and intellectual engagement. From an early age, he demonstrated an intense curiosity about the world, about language, about communication, and about human behavior, qualities that would later serve him extraordinarily well as an actor. Edgar was a gifted student with a particular aptitude for languages. He would eventually become fluent in 5 languages: Spanish, English, French, Portuguese, and Italian, a remarkable linguistic achievement that has given him the ability to work in film industries across multiple countries and cultures. This multilingual ability is not merely a professional asset. It reflects a genuine intellectual passion for understanding how different cultures think, communicate, and construct meaning. He studied communications and political science at university in Venezuela, developing a broad intellectual foundation that has informed his approach to character work throughout his career. He has spoken about how understanding political systems and human social structures helps him understand the motivations of the characters he plays, giving his performances a depth and specificity that goes beyond surface-level portrayal. Career Trajectory. Edgar Ramirez began his acting career in Venezuelan television, building experience in his home country before pursuing the international opportunities that his exceptional talent and linguistic abilities made possible. He moved into Latin American cinema and began to develop a reputation as one of the most exciting young performers working in the Spanish-speaking world. His international breakthrough came with the 2010 French-Venezuelan film Carlos, in which he played Carlos the Jackal, the notorious Venezuelan-born terrorist and militant who operated in Europe during the 1970s and 1980s. The film, directed by Olivier Assayas, is a 5.5-hour epic that traces Carlos's entire career, and Edgar Ramirez's performance is nothing short of extraordinary. He inhabits Carlos with terrifying authenticity, the charisma, the ideological fervor, the violence, the vanity, the ultimate tragedy of a man who believed so completely in his own mythology. The performance won him the César Award, which is the French equivalent of the Academy Award for Most Promising Actor, and it announced him to international audiences as a performer of exceptional power and range. From Carlos onward, Edgar Ramirez's career took him across multiple continents and into some of the most interesting film and television projects of the past decade. He appeared in the American biographical film Deliver Us from Evil in 2014. He played the title role in Joy in 2015, the David O. Russell film starring Jennifer Lawrence. He appeared in the action thriller Point Break remake in 2015. He played Johnny Versace in the 2nd season of the American Crime Story anthology series on FX, a deeply researched, emotionally complex portrayal of the legendary fashion designer in the months leading up to his murder that earned Edgar further critical recognition. In Jungle Cruise, Edgar brought his particular gift for portraying tragic, complex figures to the role of Don Aguirre, a man whose obsessive love for his daughter set in motion centuries of suffering for himself and his men. Edgar found the humanity at the center of what could have been a straightforwardly monstrous character, and made Aguirre genuinely moving. Jesse Plemons Early Life INTXAS. Jesse Lon Plemons was born on April 2, 1988, in Dallas, Texas. He grew up in Mart, Texas, a very small town with a population of only a couple of thousand people, where he was raised in a close-knit family environment far removed from the world of Hollywood glamour. Texas small-town life gave Jesse a groundedness and a lack of pretension that has remained one of the most distinctive qualities of both his personal character and his professional approach. Jesse discovered acting early and pursued it with genuine passion from childhood. He began appearing in commercials and small television roles as a child, demonstrating natural ability and a comfort in front of the camera that suggested performing was genuinely in his nature rather than something imposed upon him by ambitious parents. Career and rise to prominence. Jesse Plemons' career is one of the most interesting in contemporary American cinema precisely because of how deliberately he has pursued quality over visibility. He has consistently chosen interesting, challenging, morally complex roles over easy commercial stardom, and the result is a body of work that is extraordinarily rich and varied. His first major breakthrough came with the television series Friday Night Lights, the critically acclaimed drama set in the world of Texas high school football. Jesse played Landry Clark, a lovable, nerdy, good-hearted young man who is one of the show's most endearing characters. The show ran from 2006 to 2011 and is widely considered one of the finest American television dramas of its era. Jesse's work on it demonstrated his ability to find genuine emotional truth in a character and to make that character feel fully real rather than like a television construct. But the role that truly demonstrated Jesse Plemons' extraordinary range came in the final season of Breaking Bad, the landmark AMC drama about a chemistry teacher who becomes a drug kingpin. Jesse joined the cast as Todd Alquist, a character who begins as an unassuming, polite young man and reveals himself to be one of the most genuinely chilling villains in the history of American television. Todd is terrifying precisely because of how normal he seems, how pleasant his manner is, how completely he lacks any recognizable moral framework while presenting the surface appearance of a regular, agreeable person. Jesse's performance is deeply unsettling and masterfully controlled, and it earned him an Emmy Award nomination. From Breaking Bad, Jesse Plemons moved into a remarkable run of film and television work. He appeared in the Coen brothers' film Hail, Caesar. He played a significant role in the film Black Mass alongside Johnny Depp. He appeared in the anthology series Fargo in its second season, playing Ed Blomquist in a performance that earned him another Emmy nomination. He appeared in Game Night, the 2018 comedy thriller. He gave an absolutely haunting performance in Charlie Kaufman's deeply experimental Netflix film I'm Thinking of Ending Things in 2020. A role that required him to be simultaneously mundane and deeply strange in ways that most actors could not have navigated. His work with director Jane Campion in The Power of the Dog in 2021 earned Jesse an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor, the formal critical recognition that his peers and discerning viewers had been giving him informally. For years. In Jungle Cruise, Jesse Plemons played Prince Joachim with a wonderfully committed eccentricity that provided a different and entertaining flavor of villainy. Theatrical, obsessive, slightly unhinged in a way that was as funny as it was threatening. Personal life. Jesse Plemons met actress Kirsten Dunst on the set of Fargo in 2015. And the two began a relationship that led to their engagement in 2017. They have 2 sons together and got married in 2022. Both are considered among the finest actors of their generation, and their relationship is spoken of in the industry with genuine warmth and respect. Paul Giamatti. Life and Extraordinary Family. Background. Paul Edward Valentine Giamatti was born on June 6, 1967, in New Haven, Connecticut. Paul Giamatti's background is one of the most academically distinguished of any working actor in Hollywood, and it begins with his father, A. Bartlett Giamatti, who was one of the most remarkable American figures of the 20th century. A. Bartlett Giamatti was a Renaissance literature scholar of international repute, the president of Yale University, one of the most prestigious academic institutions in the world, and then commissioner of Major League Baseball, the highest position in American professional baseball. He died of a heart attack in 1989, just days after banning legendary player Pete Rose from baseball for life, a decision that generated enormous controversy and attention. Growing up as the son of the president of Yale University gave Paul Giamatti an upbringing of intense intellectual stimulation and considerable public scrutiny. Yale University is one of the great academic institutions of the world, and being raised within that environment, surrounded by scholars, intellectuals, artists, and public figures, shaped Paul's sensibility in profound ways. He developed a love of literature, theater, and ideas that has remained central to his identity and his approach to his craft throughout his career. He attended Choate Rosemary Hall, a prestigious preparatory school in Connecticut, before following his father's footsteps to Yale University itself, where he studied English. After completing his undergraduate degree at Yale, Paul went on to do graduate study at the Yale School of Drama, one of the finest professional theater training programs in the United States, where he received his Master of Fine Arts degree. His training was therefore both intellectually rigorous and practically comprehensive, giving him a foundation in theatrical craft that has informed every performance of his career. Early career and theater. After completing his training at the Yale School of Drama, Paul Giamatti worked extensively in theater, building the technical foundation of his craft on the stage before transitioning fully to film and television. His theater work gave him a depth of technical skill and a comfort with language and text that remains evident in every screen performance he gives. He has a particular gift for the musicality of dialogue, for understanding not just what words mean but how they sound, how they rhythm, how they can be shaped and colored to reveal character. His early film appearances were almost exclusively in supporting roles, small, often scene-stealing parts in larger productions that demonstrated his talent without yet fully showcasing his range. He appeared in films including Singles, Private Parts, Donnie Brasco, The Truman Show, and Saving Private Ryan throughout the 1990s, building a reputation as one of the most reliably excellent character actors working in American cinema. Breakthrough and critical recognition. Paul Giamatti's breakthrough as a leading man came relatively late. He was already in his late 30s before he got the opportunity to carry a film on his own, but when it came, it was explosive. Man on the Moon in 1999, in which he played a supporting role alongside Jim Carrey, brought him wider attention. American Splendor in 2003, a unique biographical film about underground comic book writer Harvey Pekar, gave him his first true leading role and demonstrated his ability to anchor a film with his own presence. But it was Sideways in 2004 that made Paul Giamatti one of the most celebrated actors of his generation. Directed by Alexander Payne, Sideways is a bittersweet comedy drama about two middle-aged friends on a wine-tasting road trip through California's wine country. Paul plays Miles Raymond, a failed novelist and wine obsessive who is depressed, self-destructive, and deeply human in his flaws and his longings. The performance is a marvel of emotional honesty and comedic precision. Miles is funny and pathetic and heartbreaking and recognizable all at once, and Paul makes every contradictory element of him feel completely authentic. He won the Los Angeles Film Critics Association Award for Best Actor and received nominations from virtually every major critics organization. The Academy Award nomination that many expected did not come in one of the most widely discussed Oscar snubs of the decade, but the film and the performance remain landmarks of early 21st century American cinema. He received his first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor for his role in Cinderella Man in 2005, playing the legendary boxing promoter and manager Joe Jacobs opposite Russell Crowe. He won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Limited Series for his performance in John Adams in 2008, the HBO miniseries in which he played the second President of the United States in a sweeping, commanding portrayal that demonstrated his ability to handle historical material with gravitas and nuance. His performance in Barney's version in 2010 earned him a Golden Globe Award for Best Actor in a Motion Picture Drama. His work in the Showtime series Billions, which began in 2016 and in which he plays Chuck Rhodes, a powerful U.S. attorney, has introduced him to a new generation of viewers and demonstrated his ability to sustain a complex, morally ambiguous character across multiple seasons of television. In 2023, Paul Giamatti received his second Academy Award nomination, this time for Best Actor, for his extraordinary performance in The Holdovers, a film in which he plays a cantankerous, unpopular prep school teacher who must remain at school over the Christmas holiday with a troubled student. The performance is widely considered among the finest of his career and of that entire year in cinema. In Jungle Cruise, Paul Giamatti plays Nilo the harbor master with the kind of gleeful, committed excess that only a performer of his caliber can make so enjoyable. He is on screen for a relatively small amount of time, but he makes every moment count, delivering a performance that is pure entertainment. Personal life: Paul Giamatti married playwright Elizabeth Cohen in 1997. They have one son together. Paul is known in Hollywood as an intensely private person who rarely discusses his personal life in public, preferring to let his work speak for itself. He is universally described by colleagues as one of the most prepared, thoughtful, and collaborative performers in the industry, a consummate professional whose deep theatrical training and genuine love of the craft make him a joy to work with. Jungle Cruise is far more than a simple adventure film built on the foundation of a theme park ride. Beneath its spectacular action sequences, its charming leads, and its sense of swashbuckling fun lies a remarkably rich tapestry of cultural references, historical contexts, and thematic ideas that reward careful examination. The film draws from centuries of real human history, engages with genuine questions about colonialism and gender, explores mythology and indigenous culture, and situates its story within the very real global catastrophe of World War I. To fully appreciate what Jungle Cruise is doing as a piece of storytelling, you need to understand the world it is drawing from and the ideas it is grappling with. That is exactly what we are going to do today. Go deep, go wide, and explore every cultural and historical thread woven into the fabric of this film. The historical reality of Spanish conquistadors. The film opens in 1556 with Don Aguirre and his band of Spanish conquistadors deep in the Amazon rainforest. And this is not simply a convenient historical setting chosen for atmospheric effect. The conquistadors were a very real and historically significant force whose impact on the Americas was catastrophic and permanent, and understanding who they actually were gives the film's opening sequences a weight and resonance that goes far beyond fantasy adventure. The Spanish conquistadors were soldiers, explorers, and colonizers who operated primarily in the 15th and 16th centuries under the authority of the Spanish crown. Following Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas in 1492, Spain embarked on an aggressive campaign of conquest and colonization across Central America, South America, and parts of North America. The conquistadors were the military instrument of this colonial enterprise. Men like Hernán Cortés, who conquered the Aztec Empire in Mexico, and Francisco Pizarro, who conquered the Inca Empire in Peru, became legendary figures whose names are inseparable from one of the most dramatic and devastating chapters in human history. The conquest of the Americas by Spanish forces resulted in the deaths of tens of millions of indigenous people through a combination of direct violence, forced labor, starvation, and, most devastatingly, the introduction of European diseases. like smallpox, measles, and influenza against which indigenous populations had no immunity. Entire civilizations that had flourished for thousands of years were destroyed within decades of European contact. The cultural, spiritual, linguistic, and social fabric of indigenous life across an entire continent was torn apart with a thoroughness and speed that remains almost incomprehensible to contemplate. The conquistadors were driven by a combination of motivations: religious zeal, personal ambition, the promise of wealth, and the directive of their government. They genuinely believed, in many cases, that they were doing God's work by bringing Christianity to people they considered heathens. This conviction allowed them to commit extraordinary acts of violence and exploitation with a clear conscience, because they had constructed a moral framework in which the destruction of indigenous culture was not a crime but a sacred duty. Jungle Cruise draws on this historical reality in its portrayal of Aguirre and his men. When Aguirre and his conquistadors accept the help of the indigenous tribe and then betray them, they are enacting a pattern of behavior that was historically typical of the conquistador relationship with indigenous peoples. Accept assistance, use resources, then take what you want by force. The film gives this betrayal supernatural consequences, the curse. But the underlying historical truth is that the betrayal itself requires no supernatural embellishment. It happened, over and over again, across centuries of colonial history. What the film does that is particularly interesting is to make Aguirre a figure of genuine tragedy rather than simple villainy. His original motivation was love for his daughter, a deeply human, deeply sympathetic impulse. But the film suggests that even love, when it is pursued through exploitation and betrayal of others, carries consequences. The curse is poetic justice. Aguirre wanted the power of the jungle's magic without respecting the culture and the people who were its guardians. The jungle punishes him by making him literally part of itself, forever. The legend of El Dorado and the mythical Amazio and the specific myth at the center of Jungle Cruise, the search for a magical tree deep in the Amazon with healing properties, draws from one of the most enduring and historically significant legends associated with South American exploration, the myth of El Dorado. El Dorado, which translates to the Golden One or the Golden City, was a legend that circulated among Spanish conquistadors and European explorers from the earliest days of South American colonization. The legend described a mythical city of extraordinary wealth, hidden somewhere in the interior of South America, whose ruler was said to be so wealthy that he covered himself in gold dust during religious ceremonies. The promise of El Dorado drove countless expeditions into the South American interior, many of which ended in disaster as explorers pushed too far into the jungle, ran out of supplies, and died of disease, starvation, or violence. Sir Walter Raleigh, the famous English explorer, made multiple expeditions to South America in search of El Dorado. Francisco de Orellana became the first European to navigate the entire length of the Amazon River in 1542, and his journey was partly motivated by the search for mythical wealth. The legend of El Dorado was so powerful and so persistent that it shaped European understanding of and relationship with South America for centuries. It was the promise of impossible riches that kept drawing explorers deeper and deeper into a jungle that was killing them. The Tears of the Moon Tree in Jungle Cruise is a variation on this theme. Rather than gold or material wealth, the object of desire is magical healing power. But the structural dynamic is identical: Europeans entering the Amazon in search of something they believe will give them extraordinary power, at the expense of the indigenous people who actually live there and whose knowledge and generosity make the Europeans' survival possible in the first place. This mythological framework is not simply borrowed for narrative convenience. It places Jungle Cruise in a long tradition of storytelling about the collision between European ambition and the natural world of the Americas. The Amazon has always functioned in the Western imagination as a place of danger, wonder, mystery, and hidden power, a space beyond the boundaries of civilization where the normal rules do not apply and where extraordinary things become possible. The film uses this imaginative tradition while also, through the mechanism of the curse, delivering a judgment on the exploitative impulse that has driven so much of the Amazon's real historical story. World War I and ITS Global's CONTXT Jungle Cruise is set in 1916, in the middle of World War I, and this choice of historical setting is far more than simple backdrop. The war is actively relevant to the film's plot. Prince Joachim wants the tree's power for Germany's war effort, and it provides a crucial context for understanding why the discovery of the Tears of the Moon would be so consequential. World War I, which ran from 1914 to 1918, was the most destructive conflict in human history up to that point. The war was fought primarily in Europe, with the Western Front, a line of trenches stretching from the English Channel to the Swiss border, becoming the defining image of the conflict. The industrialization of warfare produced weapons of mass destruction including poison gas, machine guns, and artillery barrages that killed soldiers in numbers that had never been seen before. The Battle of the Somme in 1916, the very year in which Jungle Cruise is set, resulted in approximately 1 million casualties on both sides over the course of just a few months. On a single day, July 1, 1916, the British Army alone suffered nearly 60,000 casualties, making it the bloodiest single day in British military history. In this context, the idea of a flower that could heal any wound and cure any disease takes on a meaning that goes far beyond fantasy. In 1916, men were dying by the millions from injuries that current medicine could not treat, from infections that antibiotics, which had not yet been discovered, could not touch. The search for medical breakthroughs was genuinely urgent in a way that peacetime never quite produces. Lily Houghton's mission to find the Tears of the Moon tree is framed by the film as a humanitarian quest, and in the context of the World War I setting, that framing carries real emotional weight. The German angle, Prince Joachim wanting the tree for Germany, also connects to real historical anxieties of the period. The war was driven partly by competing imperial ambitions, and the idea of any single nation gaining access to a power as absolute as the ability to heal all wounds and confer immortality would have been genuinely terrifying to the other combatants. The film uses the supernatural premise to externalize and dramatize the very real competition for advantage that characterized the actual conflict. Colonialism and the ethics of discovery. One of the most significant cultural themes running through Jungle Cruise is the ethics of exploration and discovery, a theme that the film engages with in ways that are more thoughtful than its adventure blockbuster exterior might suggest. The entire premise of the film, a Western scientist traveling to the Amazon to extract a valuable natural resource, is a colonial narrative. Lily Houghton is not a villain, and the film does not present her as one, but her mission has unmistakable structural similarities to the colonial enterprises that caused so much destruction in the Americas over centuries. She wants to find something in the Amazon, take it back to Europe, and use it to benefit people in her world. The fact that her intentions are genuinely benevolent does not entirely resolve the ethical complexity of what she is doing. The film navigates this tension with some care. The curse that punishes Aguirre and his men for their betrayal of the indigenous tribe serves as the film's primary moral statement on the ethics of extracting from cultures that are not your own. The conquistadors paid an eternal price for their exploitation. The film uses this supernatural mechanism to make a moral argument about the relationship between outsiders and indigenous culture. Lily, by contrast, approaches the tree with respect rather than exploitation. She is a scientist who wants to study and understand rather than simply take and control. And in the film's most significant moral moment, She chooses to sacrifice the petal, the object of her entire quest, for a human being rather than for scientific advancement. This choice distinguishes her fundamentally from Aguirre and from Joachim, both of whom wanted the tree's power for control and domination. The film is not a sophisticated post-colonial critique. It is, at its heart, a Disney adventure film. But it gestures meaningfully toward the ethical complexity of its subject matter in ways that elevate it above simple adventure entertainment. Gender and the suffragette era. Lily Houghton's story is explicitly framed within the context of the women's rights movement and the fight for gender equality that was at its most intense precisely during the period in which the film is set. 1916 was a crucial moment in the history of women's rights in Britain. The suffragette movement, the campaign for women's right to vote, had been fighting for decades and was reaching a decisive phase. Women in Britain would not receive the right to vote until 1918, and even then, initially only women over 30 who met certain property requirements. Full equal voting rights for women in Britain did not come until 1928. In 1916, a brilliant woman like Lily Houghton was living in a society that formally denied her the right to participate in its political processes and that informally denied her access to professional recognition and respect at every turn. The scenes at the academic institution in London that open the film are more than comic setup. They are a pointed illustration of the systemic barriers that women faced in professional and intellectual life in the early 20th century. Lily is not simply overlooked by accident. She is actively excluded by design, by structures that her male colleagues have built and benefit from and have no incentive to dismantle. She cannot present her own research because the institution literally does not allow women to speak. Her brother has to speak for her. This is not satire or exaggeration. This was the reality of women's participation in academic and professional life in Britain in the 1910s. Lily's response to these barriers: to simply go around them, to take what she needs and do what she needs to do regardless of what institutions tell her is permitted, models an approach to structural inequality that has genuine historical resonance. The suffragettes themselves frequently operated outside the boundaries of what was legally and socially permissible, because working within those boundaries was a guaranteed path to continued exclusion. The film's conclusion, in which Lily is appointed a full professor at Cambridge University, is a triumphant moment that carries real historical weight. Cambridge University did not fully grant women equal academic status with men until 1948. The film places Lily ahead of that curve, imagining a world in which extraordinary achievement and extraordinary courage could open doors that history took much longer to open. It is a wish-fulfillment fantasy, but a culturally meaningful one. Indigenous culture and the Amazon tribes. The indigenous tribe that appears in the film's opening sequences, the people who heal Aguirre's men with the tree's petals and who placed the curse upon them when betrayed, represents another significant cultural and historical dimension of the film. The Amazon rainforest is home to hundreds of distinct indigenous peoples, many of whom have maintained continuous cultures in the region for thousands of years. These are not primitive or simple societies. They are complex, sophisticated cultures with deep knowledge of the natural world that in many cases far exceeds anything Western science has developed. Indigenous Amazonian peoples have developed detailed understanding of the medicinal properties of thousands of plants, knowledge accumulated over millennia of living in close relationship with the rainforest ecosystem. The history of how this knowledge has been treated by outsiders is one of the most troubling stories in the broader history of colonialism. Indigenous knowledge has been routinely extracted by Western researchers and pharmaceutical companies, patented and profited from, without consent or compensation to the communities whose generations of accumulated wisdom made the discovery possible. This practice, known as biopiracy, is a continuation in modern form of the same exploitative dynamic that Jungle Cruise dramatizes in its 1556 opening. The curse that the tribe places on Aguirre and his men is the film's fantasy version of the very real consequences that follow from the violation of indigenous sovereignty and knowledge. In reality, of course, there is no magical curse. There is only the loss of irreplaceable cultural knowledge, the destruction of communities, and the ongoing trauma of colonial violence. The film uses the supernatural to give these historical injustices a visible consequence, making the moral stakes of exploitation concrete and immediate in a way that works within the adventure genre. The theme of immortality and its Jungle Cruise engages deeply with the theme of immortality, not as something desirable, but as something deeply and profoundly costly. This is a theme with roots in mythology and storytelling traditions from cultures all around the world. From the Epic of Gilgamesh, arguably the oldest written story in human history, to the Greek myth of Tithonus, who was granted immortality but not eternal youth and slowly withered into endless decrepit existence, to the Wandering Jew of medieval legend, to the Dorian Gray story of Oscar Wilde. Human storytelling has repeatedly returned to the idea that immortality is not a blessing but a curse. The desire to escape death is one of the most fundamental human impulses, and story after story across cultures and centuries has explored why getting what we want in this regard might be the worst thing that could happen to us. Frank Wolf's 400 years of cursed immortality in Jungle Cruise are not a life, they are a sentence. He has watched everyone he ever knew die. He has watched the world change around him in ways he cannot fully process because he is frozen in time while everything else moves forward. He cannot form genuine connections because every genuine connection eventually ends in loss. He has retreated behind humor and deflection because genuine emotional engagement has become too painful for a man who has been losing people for 4 centuries. Aguirre and his men are even more explicitly imprisoned, physically transformed by their curse, literally becoming part of the jungle that punished them, denied both life and death in any meaningful sense. They are trapped in a state of neither existence nor non-existence that is presented as horrifying rather than miraculous. The film's moral argument about immortality is made most clearly in its climax. When Lily has the power to restore Frank to mortality, to give him back the ability to age and die and live a genuinely human life, she does not hesitate. She sacrifices the petal because she understands, intuitively and completely, that genuine life requires finitude. That meaning comes from mortality. That the ability to lose things is what makes things worth having. It is a profound and ancient insight dressed in the clothes of a blockbuster adventure film, and it gives the story an emotional and philosophical depth that rewards serious engagement. The Amazon is a cultural symbol throughout Western culture and imagination. The Amazon rainforest has functioned as a symbol of the unknown, the dangerous, the primal, and the magical. It is a space that exists, in the cultural imagination, at the edge of the world, a place where civilization ends and something older, wilder, and more powerful begins. This cultural meaning of the Amazon has been constructed over centuries of exploration literature, travelogue, scientific expedition, and popular entertainment. From the earliest accounts of conquistadors pushing into the jungle to the adventure novels of the Victorian and Edwardian eras to countless films, the Amazon has been the place where Western protagonists go to encounter the extraordinary. It is where the rules change. Where nature is not domesticated and controlled but wild and sovereign. Where hidden things, treasures, creatures, civilizations, powers, still exist beyond the reach of modernity. Jungle Cruise explicitly draws on this tradition, but it does so with a degree of self-awareness. The film knows it is working within a genre that has historically used the Amazon and other non-Western environments as backdrops for Western adventure without much concern for the cultures and peoples who actually live in those environments. By making the indigenous tribe's sovereignty and dignity central to the moral logic of the story, their betrayal is the original sin, their curse is the mechanism of justice. The film acknowledges and partially corrects for this tradition. The Amazon in Jungle Cruise is not simply a dangerous exotic backdrop. It is presented as a living, responsive, morally coherent system that rewards respect and punishes exploitation. It has its own logic, its own power, its own rules. Outsiders who enter it with humility and genuine respect, like Lily, are ultimately rewarded. Outsiders who enter it with arrogance and extractive intent, like Aguirre, like Joaquim, are ultimately destroyed by it. This moral geography of the jungle gives the film a cultural coherence that elevates it above straightforward adventure entertainment. The pirate and adventure genre tradition Jungle Cruise consciously and deliberately positions itself within a long tradition of adventure storytelling that stretches from the novels of H. Rider Haggard and Joseph Conrad through the golden age of Hollywood adventure films to the modern blockbuster era represented by Indiana Jones and Pirates of the Caribbean. H. Rider Haggard's King Solomon's Mines, published in 1885, established many of the conventions that Jungle Cruise draws on: the journey into an unknown and dangerous territory, the search for a legendary hidden treasure, the eccentric but capable guide, the confrontation with supernatural forces. Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, published in 1899, explored the darker psychological and moral dimensions of the journey into the African jungle in ways that influenced an entire century of adventure storytelling. Indiana Jones, particularly Raiders of the Lost Ark, is an obvious touchstone for Jungle Cruise, the academic adventurer protagonist. The race against villainous forces to claim a supernatural object with world-altering power, the combination of action and humor and genuine mythological stakes. The Pirates of the Caribbean comparison is even more direct, since both films are based on Disney theme park attractions and both feature a swashbuckling, morally ambiguous male lead paired with a more principled and determined female counterpart. By situating itself within this tradition, while also updating its gender dynamics. Lily is the driving force and the moral center of the story, not Frank. Jungle Cruise participates in a broader cultural conversation about how the adventure genre is evolving to reflect contemporary values and sensibilities while retaining the elements of excitement and spectacle that make the genre enduringly popular. The theme of redemption running through every layer of Jungle Cruise is one of storytelling's oldest and most fundamental themes: redemption. Almost every major character in the film is defined by something they need to be redeemed from or redeemed for. Aguirre committed an act of betrayal driven by love and has spent 4 centuries paying for it. His story is one of punishment, and the question of whether redemption is even possible after such a fundamental moral failure. The film suggests, through the mechanism of the petrification sequence, that even Aguirre eventually finds a kind of release, an end to the punishment, even if not quite the triumphant redemption of a hero. Frank has spent 400 years in a kind of living purgatory, not quite alive, not quite dead, not quite human. His redemption comes through his connection with Lily, who sees through his humor and his deflection to the genuine person underneath, and who values him enough to sacrifice everything to restore his humanity. Frank's redemption is not just supernatural, it is deeply personal. He is redeemed from the loneliness and the emotional isolation that 4 centuries of cursed existence have imposed on him. Lily's story is a different kind of redemption, a vindication. She spends the film fighting against a world that refuses to recognize her worth, her intelligence, and her contribution. Her redemption is the moment at the end when Cambridge University finally gives her the position and the recognition she has always deserved. It is the world being redeemed for its failure to see her clearly. This theme of redemption connects Jungle Cruise to the deepest roots of human storytelling. From religious narratives of sin and forgiveness to secular stories of failure and recovery, the idea that people can be redeemed, that the past does not have to permanently define the future, is one of the most powerful and persistent ideas in human culture. Jungle Cruise delivers this theme within a spectacular adventure framework, but the emotional resonance it generates is genuine and rooted in something very old and very true about how human beings understand their lives.